Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter, and our guest for this one is going to be ynoT, who is a North American commentator. He's done a whole bunch of online tournaments, if you go and check it on his page. Also, he's done that thing, in case you're European and didn't follow CS about 10 years ago, where he's just put his name backwards, hasn't he? That's his way of being unique. So his name must be Tony, I assume, and then he's written it backwards as ynoT. Is this accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which just means you were on ESL forums about 10, 15 years ago or something, right? Well, that was the thing back then.
Yeah, it's funny actually, just quickly, that there was a time when there was like a 1.6 NA player who he reached out to me on ESA. He was like, can I have your name? I'm like more important than you. And I was like, yeah,
okay,
dude, whatever.
All right.
I was like, yeah, dude, whatever, take it. And he ended up giving it back later, but it's funny.
I just like the goal of this guy. By the way, excuse me, I am sort of more important than you. Can I just have your name? Like,
you know, it was like pseudo like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Also, now you're just giving people ideas, but okay. Right, let's get into it. So we always like to let the guests start on the first good point. So what is the good point going to be? ynoT?
Yeah, the good point. So this is pretty new, at least news to me. Maui and I were talking about it today on our co-stream, and it was the live seeding for ESL Pro League, and that's like a concept that I'm pretty much unfamiliar with, like from top to bottom. I've never.
Is this the premise, as in between the rounds? It's like reseeding it, sort of, or something like that.
It's like for the Swiss format, they ranked everybody else. So for the Swiss at ESL Pro League, Spirit ended up being ranked the highest, but the teams are the ones that did it as opposed to VRS.
Oh, right.
So like
okay.
that's why Spirit played TYLOO, who was ranked lowest.
Oh, so it's actually like what they used to do years ago in Pro League, and Katowice, where they had the teams just rank each other like 1 to 15 or whatever, and then you do an aggregate, and if someone's a crazy outlier, you take it out so they can't cheat or whatever. Right?
Exactly.
It's the same premise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that was basically me saying like that. As far as the Swiss has gone, I think that historically anybody would say that Swiss has had its nightmares at times,
sure.
And another format discussion, just seeding in general has had a lot of nightmares in Counter-Strike. And I think that this is really something that should be more standardized or played with at the very least for other formats, including Swiss. Because for me, watching these games and also seeing the seeding work out, I already know that by the end of the Swiss, most, if not all of the teams that deserve to be where they are will be put where they are based on their merit. And I think that's really interesting and cool because it's not like Joe Schmo on the street deciding it. And it's also not randomized. It's very much so calculated. And I think that's really cool.
Okay.
Overall, we've seen this before. I think other times was Star Ladder, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was some of the ESL IEM events, and I thought Star Ladder did it, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Thorin. It led to just. It's cool to see it because it also preempts you to how teams are perceiving each other. I think it works actually best, not in the middle of a season like Pro League now, but actually in, say, the first tournament in an off season, and after an off season. So I think like the Blast Bounty kind of gives you like a pseudo version of that, but that's more individual matchup focused because they're picking the opposing team for themselves and who they think they're going to do well against.
Yeah.
And that's like a low seeded team also picking like usually a high seeded team, at least in the current bounty format. But this one, you just see everybody's thoughts on everybody. And it's kind of funny because it does lead to some occasionally interesting little tidbits of like, oh, why do they see them like that? Which could drive a narrative. Again, it's not the same as the bounty where they're directly picking their opponents. But for example, Eternal Fire ranked Liquid 14th out of 15th, which I just find funny. So seeing little bits like that can enhance the whole perspective.
Yeah, and Thorin, you actually came from like an era of Counter-Strike where like just getting its footing in at least Counter-Strike was like the Swiss system. I think back to like primarily like the E-Leagues because that's where they popularized it pretty heavily. And there was like a lot. I remember there was a lot of different like nightmare scenarios when it came down to the second E-League major rather, where there were teams getting seeded against each other in this random, like, you'll never know who's playing who. They're posting it on, like, a pin board.
Yeah.
And people, like, continued with that for a while, like, similar format, and it just never really itched that same scratch, so...
No, by the way, I totally agree. Like, one of the biggest problems you have with Swiss anyway is even when people would seed the first round, which by the way wasn't even the case for majors because we couldn't officially acknowledge seeding existed. Actually, even beyond that, you immediately just fuck it up on the next ones anyway. Like, you can just get some super unfair. Like, everyone knows there's teams that have gone 3-0, and you look who they played. Like, how did they even get those teams? Then there's the team
G2 beat, what was it? Misfits, Vega Squadron, and Flash Gaming to make it to the next stage of that same major I'm talking about.
And by the way, what you're referring to as well well, like, I'll give you the obvious one, which is the best example ever is the one that basically ruined Optic. If you remember, Stanislaw left Optic because at the major, they were coming in as like the number 4 team or number 3 team in the world. They got Virtus Pro first round. I think they got Astralis after that. It's like, what? Like, you basically had the 2 best teams in the tournament, by the way, just not opening 2 matches because it was randomized seeding. Yeah, you're right. So, first of all, I do hate that. The sad thing is, in a way, this is also how we have to be in CS. Like, in CS, you can't actually expect things to be perfect or be fixed or be ideal. What you have to ask for is just better. That's it. Because here's what we have to ask for, right? In theory, if VRS was done perfectly, VRS could do it all. It could invite, it could seed, it could do it. The problem is at the moment, it's super scuffed. So at the moment, I'm okay just using VRS to invite because it's going to so very vaguely get it right. Like, it's going to miss, like, you know, one team at the bottom I don't agree with. But it's going to make sure the top 15 all get invited. So I'm fine with that. But I do think the flaw you've seen with the fact that they have to invite so far out in advance from VRS is it doesn't work for seeding. It's why you end up with some groups that look super scuffed because in the meantime you have a bunch of lands and you're like, wait, that team's terrible, this team's amazing. Suddenly the group just looks really unfair because he seeded it 2 months out. If you actually look now, the good thing about this live seeding is, in theory, fans don't seem to realise, because they use like an outlier system if they're doing it the same as ESL, where you can't really just like, oh, lol, I think Spirit is 15th. And then you like, that doesn't really work, guys. Like, if you do that, what they do is they just discount your fucking vote, basically, because they know you're being a dickhead. Like, you have to be within like a reasonable aggregate of, like, let's say like 7 spots off someone else or something out there. So you can be a little bit off. Like, essentially, as you're saying, it already allows interesting rankings, because maybe it turns out from scrims, actually, they do think Team Liquid's like actually not even a good team here. And maybe enough teams agree with that means their seeding goes down. By the way, the reason why this in theory does work as a system is because, one, no one questions if players decide something. So, well, that solves that one. You don't have to worry about what system and what ranking are we using here. As long as players say it, people are happy with it anyway. And then more importantly, it actually is incentivized for all the teams to do it properly, because it will fuck you eventually in the tournament. Yeah. So like I said, even though you think people will just be silly and do like a bad vote, if they do that, that's potentially going to actually like give someone else an easier seed or make a harder seed for them later. So in the long run, especially once people have done it a few times, everyone's actually incentivized to just do it properly and really do what they think their 1 to 15 is. Especially because, by the way, if we all do it right, it's better than actually whatever current seeding system we had. So what's the downside? I'm with you.
I was going to say that, like, my last, to add on to your point, you bring up something I think is pretty interesting, is that scrim idea, you know? Like, these teams, you can kind of hone in on what they actually feel like their current placement is in their own mind versus everybody else, based on the fact that you now have a full list, you know? I think that's kind of cool.
And also, to me, I'm with Maui. You're only going to find it occasionally, but probably the most interesting one is you'll actually find out who the like sleeper team that everyone thinks is good from scrims is. Like, there'll be some team you've never seen at one of these lands, but like, the joke would have been, if someone had done this 2 tournaments ago, but people had all been picking like 3D Max higher, you would have been like, hey, what's going on? Is there something going on with this team? Like, should I pay attention? Meanwhile, there are the teams that are the dead teams and everyone knows it. So I actually I'm actually interested to see how this will affect future ones. And also, by the way, just seeding between the fucking rounds just seems awesome anyway. It seems like a better idea. Yeah. Right, Maui, what is your good point?
Yeah, mine's one that I'm not going to go over the moon for this team, but it's a pleasant surprise, okay? So give them a little bit of credit. Not that they probably consume Western media in the slightest, but I just think that the run that TYLOO had through the first stage as ESL Pro League's been playing out was really impressive, mostly because the teams they beat were fairly legit. Like, even though they came in through the ESL Challenger League, the Asia component of that, over a couple other Asian teams like Linvision, Atox, what have you, they were able to get 3 victories in BO3s on land versus teams that, I'm not going to say are world beaters. Some of them are inconsistent, but very different styles in teams too. That's what's impressive to me. Like 3D Max, I've labeled before as being this highly tactical team, really kind of intricate strategies, very usually well executed, not always the highest quality in personnel. But then they kind of beat a team completely opposite of that and 2-0 them as well in Eternal Fire. And Eternal Fire, you know, a less tactical team, more about just hitting the same bomb site 4 out of 5 gun rounds and hoping that Xantares gets a double entry on one of those. And then they beat FlyQuest in a really close game when the pressure was actually on. So I'm just going to say TYLOO, a lot of bright spots too. I'd say that Jam Young has definitely stolen my attention as an individual. I'm not going to say he's the most cerebral player yet. I haven't really seen that, but aim to aim against 3D Max, he dominated them. Like, nobody could shoot him back in a fair 50-50 gun duel, which was presented frequently. And then against even Xantares and the Eternal Fire guys, man, he was clocking him. So it was really sick to see. I'm not. I guess like other players on the team right now, Mozia is looking like the more stable rifler. Like I think Jam Young's probably got the higher peaks, but Mozia just seems like the guy game to game. I'm a little bit more certain of what I'm getting from him. And then for G, I don't know. I've seen halves where he gets 1 kill and then halves where he gets 15. So he seems extremely streaky. And like I'll say about anyone that's an opera entering tier 1, it's just that the first couple games you play against everybody, they're just not used to what you do. So I feel like he's kind of boosted by that. Even though he's been around for a while, none of these people have played him. So I feel like that's why he's kind of a half-to-half guy, or you don't really know what you're getting map to map, because his style might just be found out for a half and he gets 1 kill, or he just runs with a slightly off-kilter, slightly more aggressive style than they're used to, and has different fallbacks and rotations than people expect, and then he farms. So I'm overall, I guess just the way I would put it is that it's great that we're also even getting a Swiss BO3 here, because if this was just a couple BO1s in the beginning, like they won their first 2 games, but if it was just a single map, I'd be less excited. But beating 3D Max and Eternal Fire in BO3s and then taking down FlyQuest to actually qualify for the next stage, I don't expect them to do anything else here. But this could actually improve their VRS ranking quite a bit, and in turn move them up in the Asia rankings. And I'd say at this point, just by doing this, they're guaranteed to make it to the Asia MRQ bare minimum, which is great, because this team has just been kind of, I always felt like they were the Chinese premier org, but then the results lately were not showing that. So yeah, all in all, I think it's exciting. It's an exciting time for Chinese CS because they've shown something.
They built what was effectively like the Chinese super team with Starry, and that was what everybody anticipated to be the team that was going to be able to take over their country and put something up in international play. And sadly, they never really looked to be like that team even slightly. I mean, these kinds of results are results in terms of like solid, bona fide LAN results that they haven't seen as an organization for a long time to be able to say that they have something going for them. Starry versus Attacker, like pound for pound, man, it's really not even close when they're both hitting their highest ceilings right now. Attacker's been there before, but like no offense at all, he just isn't at that same point. He's not that same player. And frankly, I think if they're looking forward towards the future and they're saying, guys, look what we're capable of, look what we're doing, it's how much stock they can put in this as a long-term team with longevity as 5. And that like stinks to say, you know what I mean? But we've seen it before where teams hit their highs and they absolutely peak, and then they say, okay, let's make the change we were going to make anyway. Is Attacker their long-term plan? Is he somebody that they were going with in the short term, knowing they could pull him on a leash very quickly? I don't really know. I don't really have a feeling one way or another whether or not he stays, because I think he's just fine. But I think if you look at this last game that they played against Spirit, an outlier as an individual is very clearly Attacker, and that's unfortunate that Starry didn't pan out, but I don't know where you look other than this spot right now, so...
By the way, I'm with you. Like, the other thing as well is, look, obviously this one tournament might end up being an outlier, but actually their results are mad, Maui. Like, the thing people will miss as well, they almost beat Gamer Legion as well, who actually is good.
Yeah.
And if you look at these teams, like 3D Max, Gamer Legion, fucking Eternal Fire, like, these aren't bad teams. These are the teams actually getting results on lands, guys. Like, these are the teams that can, like, beat the top teams. So I think that's wild that you have those results. And then also, when you look at the players, like, look, everyone's doing that thing where just because he did the interviews and they think he's a good meme, they like the G guy, etc. I don't even know if that guy's actually going to turn out to be a top player. The Jam Young guy actually is fucking the shit. That guy actually looks like he's really good. Like, that player
he was going to try out for their Valorant team even. That's so funny to me.
Makes sense. No, and also the other thing is as well, this is why it's kind of sad it was only Mongols for the last few years. And every time like Lin Vision qualified, it was like a meme and no one even thought they were any good, because China should always, at a minimum, have like some good aimers. Like, they definitely have loads of FPS talent over there. It's just that in Northern CS2, we never had the old TYLOO squads. We never had like a coherent set of people who'd been a bunch of lands. So, no, I thought it was quite a cool, and there's no downside to it, man. Just look at the results. You have to celebrate them. Yeah, I'm with you. It's a good one. Right. What I've picked for mine, it's actually rare because normally I'm a hater, I'm elitist in this sense. But I actually think now, if you do the whole, like, what I know do is when I say tier 1, I usually mean roughly the top 10, maybe like 13, 14 teams. Okay. Essentially just teams that were like, if you went to a real LAN and you had 16 teams there, who would actually be capable of winning a game? If you're going to come 0-3, you're probably like, you're just a borderline, you're like a tier 1.5 or a tier 2 team, right? So if you take that as the rough bounds, I don't think tier 1.5 down to like 3 has ever been this competitive. I mean, not only this tournament, but Cluj as well. When you actually have these Swiss systems and group stages where they're all like around that level, holy fuck, the variance is crazy. This isn't like the old days where you could actually just take the world ranking. You could almost just go, right, 7 beats 9, 8 beats 13. Bro, now with this, that's not even vaguely a factor now. Now you'd have to actually do real analysis, like what players do they have, what style do they play, what's the map pool, like the fucking variance is nuts. I mean, first of all, the TYLOO example itself just plays into that, but you go beyond that, like Saw. If you don't know, guys, this isn't even the dead Saw, this is the new Saw with the 2 endpoint players. Like, this actually is a real team now. There's so many teams in this fucking M18, Amiga, by the way, almost straight up beat fucking Pain. You can just go so many names deep now. I don't think I've ever seen LAN play be this this is almost what used to happen online with this level of team. Now on LAN, the competition level is crazy. What do you think of this? Why not?
Yeah, I think that's funny you actually bring this up. Maui and I were kind of talking about how the level of, I think honestly, not even skill, just everything in Counter-Strike has come so astronomically far from the beginning to where a player at the very top will say, just for a very extreme example of Donk, right? Donk is a guy who you can't even fathom how good that guy is. So anybody below him, even marginally at a tier 1 level, like you say, to like the normal person that isn't actually like a fan or an analyst, looks like shit, right? They just look not very good compared to Donk's levels. But then you look towards, you know, these number 30, 35, 40 teams, and these guys are all capable. These guys are all ready to be able to get their one game in, right? Whether or not it may be like a deep run into a tournament or a win, that's not for anybody to say. But the level of variance you're talking about is absolutely there. And that's also considering a lot of these teams in that bracket haven't even gotten the chance to show it on LAN yet. They haven't been given the VRS invites yet. They haven't been given the opportunity to qualify throughout any more than 1 or 2 spots per LAN that are already pretty much taken. And that's the coolest thing, in my opinion, because look, at HLTV, it's like, Bet Boom, number 20. That's a team I want to see play a couple of more LANs with Boomich and Axi on that, right? Obviously looking towards a little bit, you know, more towards the bottom. Bait is a team we really haven't seen with all that many LAN reps on them under their belts. And it's, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that the fact that we haven't even seen some of these teams in full swing is the most prominent thing for me.
I mean, the way that some of these teams play now, it's like they either have some crazy up-and-comers a lot of the time, or they actually seem to have good strategies. And I'd say that it's like they'll level up one side of their game or the other, and they're not there by accident anymore. I think that there's such a high quantity of tier 2 games that go on now that you have so much time to iron out what's going well, what's going wrong. Like, the teams are, you know, people say that online is such a slog and such a grind, but that's why it produces some incredible players nowadays. And it produces some teams that clearly specialize in certain aspects. Again, 3D Max being one of them. It's like, yeah, you got to work on something if your personnel aren't good enough. And that's the only way you're going to make it up there, because I think you look at it, there's some teams that are even kind of lower that probably you'd maybe think like, okay, personnel-wise, surely they should just be higher by now, but then they're missing some other aspect. And, like, I think, like, who would be one, for example? I don't know, like Fnatic, for example. You got a few players on that team that should probably be something by now, but then it's like, they're just too top-heavy. They're too deficient. And that's why they don't make this breakthrough to actually getting into the top 30. So, I like that there's enough opportunities for them. Like, it's not good for VRS, let's say, but there's a lot of CCT stuff, the ESL Challenger League stuff. The HLTV rankings will reflect where they're moving up or down in this space. I just wish that, I guess the dark side of it, or the unfortunate part, is just that, unfortunately, VRS doesn't consider so much of this stuff that they're doing, and that's why you've got teams that, like NIP, for example, where I thought maybe they'd shoot up the rankings eventually, but they're not gaining really any ground when it comes to VRS, so they're gonna go to Fragadelphia, for example.
They shot themselves in the foot with that Jax thing as a side thing, by the way. That's just like, I feel like they put way too much stock in trying to make that work. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Right, what's great is I'm going to actually just read what the first part of the copy for this said, because one, it's funny, and you're just going to think there's no possible way you have a real point, but I have a real point that's going to come on the back of it. So, do your balls stink? That's a real thing it said in the copy. Now you're going to think, what the fuck are you talking about? Yes, that is a great idea to put out there, but here's the reason why it's an interesting question, and one that philosophers haven't actually always pondered throughout human history. It's because, one, if you have to ask, They definitely do. I'll just tell you that right now. And then two, as I've made this point in the past, Maui's, I heard it before, what people don't know, it's actually just an interesting piece of trivia, is the human sense of smell, the olfactory sense, is not actually, unfortunately, like a precise precision unit that just detects like a level or something. What it actually detects is changes in an environment. So the famous example would be, if you do just go to a LAN and you're there all week and you're just eating pizzas and everyone stinks, you don't notice it in the moment that you're there. But if you go outside and smoke and then come back in 5 minutes later, you're going to be like, what the fuck? Fucking hell, someone clean all this up, because it's the change in the environment that's going to tell you that it smells. So basically, this isn't just about balls. Everyone who's a gamer, if you're just sat in your room all day long, spoiler, you don't think you smell. It's like the joke is, it's what, you know, when people who are cat people, they go, my cat doesn't even smell. Bro, everyone knows you have a cat. They can smell it on every piece of clothing you're wearing that cat touched. We can all smell it. You're same with the weed guy. Oh, I can't even smell it. Yeah, because everything smells like weed in your apartment. So the point is to bring it all the way back. The reason why this is actually important is because Mando can help you with that problem. They can answer the question of, does it stink? Yes, but they can fix it, because the crucial thing is this. The technology that Mando has is they realized that you don't actually have to stop people sweating and therefore having the smell to stop the smell. All you have to do is, it turns out body odor is actually caused by the bacteria eating your sweat. That's what makes the smell. It's not the bacteria itself. So what Mando products do is they just essentially stop the smell part. They stop the body odor. And the best part, if you're a gamer, is one, it lasts for up to 72 hours. So you don't even have to do this every day, by the way. And then secondly, as we often point out, like if you take, for example, the whole body deodorant, you can just put that everywhere. You can put that all over your body. It's essentially safe on all different parts. Also, if you use I actually think the wipes are the best one. That if you're just someone sat at your PC, streaming, playing 6 games of Face It in a row, whatever, you just use the wipe if you haven't got time to get up and go and actually have a shower or get changed, etc. Just nice quick one, and then you'd be nice and presentable. So if you want to try America's #1 whole body deodorant formula right now, you could go to shopmando.com, shopmando.com, and you will get 40% off your starter pack using the code, it's on screen, CS2 at shopmando.com. And that is basically, it comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and then 2 free products of your choice. Like I said, you could choose the little deodorant wipes. I think they're pretty good if you're a gamer. The mini body wash is quite good. I enjoy the soaps as well. I actually think the soaps have a very sort of manly musk smell to them that I enjoy. Right, okay, thank you to Mando, and for that hilarious copy that just allowed me to just say, do your balls stink? And then just actually really like leave it out there just for everyone to think about. Don't be self-conscious, though. Just use Mando, no problem. Right, I will now move on to the bad point. So what is the bad point? What's funny is, Maui almost actually, you thought he was going to like tread all over it there, didn't you? But what is your bad point? Come on, it's perfect second setup.
Yeah, that is really perfect. Yeah, my bad point is Fnatic. I want to.
It's the fact that had to be the one he pulled of all the names you had to pull, Maui. That's actually what he was setting up there as well. Go on then.
It's quite literally, I'm frankly tired of being a Fnatic apologist.
Okay.
I've been a Fnatic apologist for a very long time. I have been on their bandwagon as far as their projects have gone. Since probably, I would say, when they were at the top, it wasn't as fun to root for them. But then when they started to find themselves on a decline, I was like, how do they get back? And the last time we'd seen them at any point in the top 10 was when they were number 9. And that was when they had Fasher, Mezzi, Nikados, and Roy.
Right.
Alongside Crims. And I think that is telling in and of itself that was the last time that they had hit that same point, right? Because I've been saying to myself, this player might make the difference. Here is the clear issue that they can now address in their roster in the next change that they make. And they do it, but they backstep in another direction as they do it. And I don't really understand that very much. Because when you look at each one of the rosters they put together, in my personal opinion, at the time of making each move, they make sense.
Right.
The Afro move, that's a move that made sense to me. Getting Dexter into IGL as opposed to Mezzi, that was a move that made sense. Body in for the roster to call, that made sense. He was also fragging very, very well in his previous rosters, and it was provable at a higher level. Higher level than even Fnatic were playing at or expecting to play at that point. Dropped off the face of the earth. And now I look at this team and I see Matisse, a player with extremely explosive potential that has proven that he can shoot with quite literally anyone in a server at any given point that he's played up against to this point, right? I have no doubt in my mind, especially considering the fact that he's playing some of the most hard aggro roles that they have. You look at a player like BlameF and say what you will. Frankly, I think that there's a lot of good that can be pulled from him, and I also think that a lot of the criticisms are more than valid. But the one thing you can't say is that he doesn't shoot. Like, he just shoots. He can kill anybody. He's one of their best late-round players passively, and to a fault sometimes, but even still. And then you look at the fact that they have an in-game leader who's been given some flowers now, right? Like he's been given some the little kicksand kind of magic where they're like, look at this guy at a major make a pretty deep run with a team that isn't really much of anything. In hindsight, maybe he was a pretty big piece to that, seeing as they haven't really done much of anything, but they also haven't really been given many chances. And then it comes down to the bottom line of this entire point is that I don't understand what Fnatic are incapable about figuring out with their offers. I frankly just don't. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like I said, the Afro move, that made sense. The NAVI move, that made sense. And every single time, it just flops. And now they're picking up an Academy player who has no bona fide results, no S-tier LAN appearances, mediocre showings against his own level of competition, and frankly is uninspiring as to now. So to wrap it all up, I guess it's just saying that I am tired of being a Fnatic apologist, and I don't know what the next move is that I can make believe other than just one AWP upgrade. A clear, direct, undisputable upgrade. That's all I can think of, really.
I haven't really seen too much of Burmylov other than the Blast Bounty and then a random CCT game with Navi Jr., just like little bits of it. And it just felt like, with Burmylov, I mean, versus Spear, he was just so outclassed. I didn't really hold it against him too much, but it's just also like, I guess the main thing that I got from the games that I saw was just like, hey, okay, one was against Navi Jr. I remember him just like missing timings. Like he would just peak like, and he's late to something. And it's almost kind of like, did you really think nobody was holding that? Like, I think he was trying to get into mid window on Mirage one time and he just like jumped hella late into like the good spot, like the little like horse ladder area,
right.
Or not like the wooden horse. And it was like, bro, they already have mid control. Like, I don't know like what you're thinking right here. And then also, it's just not really explosive at all. Like, nothing I saw was showing me, okay, this guy, like, at least with certain operas, I'll say in tier 2, especially from Eastern Europe, by the way, you'll just see like a couple shots per game where you're like, oh Jesus Christ, I get why you're on this team, and there's some potential. I just haven't even seen potential. And maybe I'm not watching every Burmylov game, and that's whatever. But it's just that the stats also fit this narrative that I just don't really. I'm not sure what they were really going with this move, and I feel like this is probably one of the rare misses because I think with Fnatic, we talked to Ross R before on Snake and Banter. He was the guy that worked with Endpoint. He found a lot of gems.
Yeah, dude.
He found a lot of diamonds in the rough, and I think this is actually his only miss. Like it's a pretty hard miss on what he was looking for here. But if I give him credit for finding all of these other people, like all the Israeli talent that are now blossomed into bona fide stars, like Nerds, like Flames. I think he was Spinks at a time. If he found people, I think Mezzi was on the team too at a point when he was working with the roster. Like, he found a lot of great players over the years, but this is one where it's like, all right, I don't know what the data told you. I don't know what your eyes test told you, but yeah, this is just a miss.
No, I know what you mean. Like, I will say, I was going to say the same thing. One of the reasons I also have some level of faith in the roster is from talking to the Ross R guy, who people don't know was one of the people who was like that endpoint pipeline that found all those players that came to tier 1. In fact, that's basically how we got in Fnatic, because they signed Mezzi and they were like, why don't we just get this guy? We need like an international roster. The thing is, I agree with you, why not? If I look at each move in isolation, it's like I can see the logic. It's actually even decent like sports GM, and like, you go for like a slight upgrade, or you just think this piece will make it better. The problem is, so far, even when they've done a few of these moves, it never seems so far to level the team up enough to make them relevant. So at the end of the day, you do have to get results. It's a results-based industry. And then the other problem I have is, you've nailed it. They've essentially at the moment gambled. I don't even mind the fair pickup. The Passion UA team did have something. They were having results that showed that there was definitely something there. So I don't hate that. There's not many IGLs out there in the scene. You can gamble on one. But yeah, what the obvious reach is, you just think you found another 17-year-old Ukrainian stud AWPer. Like, maybe there's more out there, but this just so far hasn't looked like the guy, and it looks like a very cynical pickup at the moment. This is like not even a particularly famous player, so maybe it works out. But the problem with that one is, if you're a Fnatic fan, like you're saying, and you've been waiting years for it to get, of course, it's like an IP. No one wants to wait any longer. We want results now. We want to actually watch something in the game. Because here's what's sad: if you go and look at their squad, I agree with your rundown. If you go down, bear in mind the fair guy's job is just be IGL. Crims at this point is just be a veteran. That's like almost a joke role he has. Blame F is the fragger, and he has his roles. Matisse is like the prospect. The obvious role is just the AWPer. And mate, the reason why this seems so fixable to me is because I'll tell you what the obvious move should be if you're Fnatic. We'll take any famous AWPer that's now available. So let me just run down the list, boys. If any of these people are fired, I hope Fnatic is the next person on the phone. So if they actually do kick Wonderful out of NAVI, immediately pick up the phone. Yeah. If they actually kick Brokey out of fucking FaZe, we'll pick up the phone on that one. If Ultimate doesn't last in Team Liquid, I know where he can fucking go. For that, bro, if you just put one competent AWPer in that Burma Love guy's spot, I think you've already got enough. Like, that team could already go, and like my point one, it could go to these lands and mix it up already. So the problem is, that's the obvious position that you'd replace. You know, the rest of them are doable. It's not impossible to keep these players.
What do you guys think about this Waro 2K guy? Because I feel like personal issues is the
He's
thing
a skilled player.
But like, that guy
he's good.
He's a skilled player.
Fnatic wanted him at one other point. I heard.
Right.
It was like him and Searson that were names that were thrown out there. And I wasn't mad with what they ended up going with, but I know Waro just shoots. So.
Because to me, the two things you got to do with this team is, one, if the Rossar guy really has proven like he's done that, then you want to obviously like keep his vision. But the real reason why I think you can't fuck around if you're Fnatic is because, bro, the second Blame F leaves this team, you've done an Unleash with Call. It's like that was your one window to make the team good. And then when that player leaves, you're not getting a replacement that's as good. Like right now, he is overqualified to be in your team and he's good. So like you've got to capitalize now. Because I actually don't think they're that far away. Why not? I think it's not a bad roster.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, I would take Waro in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah,
but
you've almost got to at this point. You've got to gamble, right? You've got to do the move that just works.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he was also an in-game leader at one point for a team that was winning maps at a major. So like, I have to rate that in some capacity. Even if he doesn't pick up the IGL role, he could probably be a nice vocal piece. So
and he speaks Russian too. So I mean, him and Fear can chalk it up.
Yeah. It'll probably help in like team talk discussions and everything. I could get into my bad point.
Go for
though.
it.
I think it's a straightforward, simple one, and it's that I don't think anybody really talks about this because nobody expects anything. But I guess my disappointment comes from the top of Australian teams. I've just at ESL Pro League, there were 3 Australian teams that showed up to it. There was FlyQuest, there was Housebets, and there was Mindfreak. Housebets and Mindfreak both failed to even win a single map versus anybody. And the most rounds that Housebets got was 5 rounds. In 6 maps, they got the best they ever did against any team was 5 rounds. Like, that's just absurdly bad. And even then, they got 13-3'd and 13-3'd by LinVision. So there's just nothing to talk about there. And then with Mindfreak, they actually pushed Eternal Fire and Amiga on individual maps. But I don't think really anybody expected anything about that. It's kind of just the scene as a whole is so weak, but I feel like the disappointing thing that I guess I'll bring up in tandem is FlyQuest 2. So FlyQuest win 5 maps, lose 7 maps. Some of the losses they had, they lost to M80. That's a team they should be beating normally. They lost to Eternal Fire. That's expected, I suppose. But then they lost to TYLOO. And TYLOO, I was just praising their run, but at the same time, the way FlyQuest have been losing some of these games is just kind of outright disappointing. I feel like Liaz as an individual sometimes has these rounds where he puts together these clearly late round brilliant 2vx's, but it's so far and few between because so often he just loses an aim duel or is outpositioned by somebody else that's an up-and-comer on another team. Like whether that's a Chinese person, European person, North American person, it doesn't matter. It feels like he's just losing aim duels to practically everybody at this point. When in fact, I would have almost said like back when it was some of the rosters that Kassad coached, in moments like Liaz's mechanics looked sick. Like he looked so quick with killing people, but now I just don't feel like he has that potential or he's going to pull that off. I guess, and I think the disappointing thing is that when Regali joined the team, I thought, okay, he is better than Alistair, despite what Tea Time said on Twitter. I don't know where that came from. No, I think that Regali is definitely better than Alistair. He has been a better player statistically than Alistair. He doesn't seem to be a problem in terms of communication or anything like that. Like he can comm just fine. I've heard some of the comm stuff between this team, and yet they're kind of slowly falling off, and that's worrying because it just feels like they should be the torchbearers for good Australian success, and it feels like the roster on paper shouldn't be this bad, but then the results are just not there. I sometimes don't even think Dexter's calling is bad, which was a problem for me when he was on Maus back in the day. I think he's actually leveled up as a caller in some ways, so I don't really blame him. And unfortunately, one guy that was the prospect, or the guy that seemed the most likely that he could have left the team and joined something else, was Ince. But unfortunately, Ince this year has just not been the same player. I don't know if he had some kind of chemistry with Alistair, but this year he's kind of been a shell of himself, and I don't know what that reason is. But slight note here is that I have heard FlyQuest has had a hard time boot camping or getting together because a lot of people are moving. Like a lot, I don't know if I guess they're moving to Europe or something, and so a lot of them are in the process of that. And if that's the case, and I'm not like conflating details with maybe just one of them or two of them, and it's like a lot of them are trying to make a big move, then that could be an explanation for their downfall. But overall, Australian scene as a whole has been pretty disappointing and just not even really flashes.
Yeah, that's it's kind of sad to hear, knowing where it came from. You brought up like the old Kassad coach teams for 1-2, and the one thing that they never really had, I guess, is that kind of pathway up to the same level that we're like, for example, I guess the Renegades team were at, where it was kind of like they were figuring out on their own while they were off doing their own thing. Okay, now Renegades is over, we're gonna do Extremum, and then Extremum is over, and we're gonna try out for these other North American teams and stuff. And it never really came together for me until obviously Liaz had joined up with that team. Eventually, where it was like they were just figuring it out on their own. They were doing everything that they could, but you can only really do so much when you're not getting the practice, when you don't have the talent available instantly, where it took like a player like Vexite to show up after a couple of years, to that level that they felt like he was ready to pick up and bring into their ranks. And you look at, I think even this Netic guy who the talent just dropped their roster, right? That's a kid who doesn't really have a way up, and that was his like attempt. That was it. That was the team that would have brought him to the level that maybe a FlyQuest would be like, yeah, let's pick up this kid. Because now if they're doing it, it's almost out of desperation, right? It's almost out of the necessity, as opposed to the looking to improve when the going is good. And now he's going to be like, damn, if I join this project, are we just going to die again? And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think that's a long shot for them to go for anyway. But Australian Counter-Strike has players and has had players, but it doesn't really have that pedestal anymore. You can put them onto like it was, here's Renegades, here's the next up, Greyhound, whoever the case may be, and here's like team 3, 4, and 5 that we're going to pick 1 or 2 players from periodically. Now it's, here we are as FlyQuest, 10 tons of crap, here you are. And that's kind of upsetting.
Yeah, the thing I also find that's a bummer as well is that they never really ever maxed out what was possible. If you think about it, right, they essentially did light versions. If people don't know, when the first Renegades team was picked up was when my friend who runs Last Free Nation, MonteCristo, was the owner of Renegades. And I told him the same story as to what I told the guy, Papa Smithy, who does FlyQuest now. I said, it's obvious why you pick the team up, because first of all, like, you have the easier qualification to the major back then, at least, through the easy spot. Also, they all speak English, so they can do all your media stuff, and they can even have sponsors in America as long as they can do the ad reads and stuff. And then lastly, there's actually just the implied value that you get over any other team from a minor region, which is they all speak fucking English and know like English culture, etc. So that means, like, in theory, you can do this. Is why I say they did a soft version. So obviously in the Renegades, they had NAF at once upon a time, they had Jacob, etc. They even had Nifty at one point. You can also go the other way. JKS always could have gone and joined another team, as he did with G2 and now Team Liquid, etc. The problem I have is, though, I'm amazed there wasn't more of it, because, like, same with the roster they have now. Like, I don't hate the roster on paper. Like you say, like, INS guy looked like he was the best player the last few years. Liaz used to be obviously a good player, was experienced. Vexite was like the prospect in the team. He just for some reason gets hard cut at a certain level at majors. You can't, like, if you put him into the RMI, he'll do all right, but then you put him in the main tournament, he never seems to have the pop off. And then the Regali guy, if people don't know, has just been mixing around the sort of OGs of the world for like 2 or 3 years now. And he is someone that I've heard from coaches people thought had talent and could be a player one day. So it's not a bad gamble, but it just hasn't worked. Like, this is a team that is worse than the sum of their parts. Like, if you look, I looked it up. Have they ever even done like a run like TYLOO did here? Not really. They've had like the odd tournament where they beat like 1.5 teams you know or even care about. Like, they don't even really do like a one-off pop-off like this. So what I find so underwhelming is, in theory, since the funds are there from FlyQuest, you can essentially, if you found an NA talent or someone from the UK that you think's good, by the way, they don't have to be off in 3D Max or fucking SAW or whatever dog shit teams they join now. They could be in your team that speak English. And the fact that because you're all speaking from an Anglosphere country, you also don't have the thing that you have in fucking TYLOO, which is, can they even get translations of what we're saying about the meta and about what's going on in scrims? It's like, you could just talk to all these, but you can get, I saw that they've got that guy from like fucking Mongolia as their coach, but like, you could also just get any coach in the world that speaks English. So to me, there's so many ways out out of this if you put the funds in the right place. I'll give you the one thing that's the upside, in my opinion. The one upside is this. One, you've only used one, like, import slot. So that could be, you can swap Regali out and go for another AWPer or someone else if you think they're good. You can upgrade that position immediately. And then the other one, it's just an obvious one, is if you sit tight, I'm pretty sure that JKS guy is going to be available soon. And he might actually be at the position where he has to play for your team now. That's probably plausible. I think when he gets kicked out of Liquid, which I think is coming, I don't think there's another big fucking check with his name written on it. He's had the G2 checks. He's had the fucking Liquid ones now. He's sat out and he's been the standard. He's not going to get the standing spot anymore, and no big team's going to sign him. So, in my opinion, if he still wants to play for a year or two, FlyQuest is going to give you a real salary. If they're all moving to America or Europe, being more better. Perfect. Now you don't even have the massive travel time. Maybe you can get like proper visas and shit. So the sad thing about it is it's actually just so underwhelming that they've been just stuck in this spot, even with the sponsorship, because I feel like almost any other move you make would somehow go better than this. This almost looks like the bottom end of what you'd have expected. Because think about that. When I said that first point, Maui, about all the tier 1.5, sadly, they're not one of them. They're not one of the teams I look at like, wow, will they upset this time? I actually expect them to lose every best of 3 at the moment. It's kind of underwhelming. I think they should be better. They should be a better team. I'm with you. And you could just make so much more of that region, surely. And now you don't, by the way, if it now turns out TYLOO's anywhere decent and Mongols is legit, you've even got a few teams in your region now, boys. You're not just on the other side of the world. So if you're really all moving, this should be the bottom, and FlyQuest should be like fucking 1.5 times better, I think. I'm with you.
What I'm hearing is when OCE lost Kassad, their stock went down. So I think that's the next move.
Funny thing is, though, that is also sort of low-key one of the ways you can fix it, because that's what you do in sports. If people don't know, in sports, what actually leveled up a lot of countries in football was just stuff like some legendary old Italian coach would go and coach like a random South American team or someone from Africa or something. And the idea is he would bring the meta and all the understanding of modern methods, and then you'd see what the talent could do. So, like, as much as I'm joking, you actually could for real. That's another place you can put your money if you're the org. Put it in the coaching staff. Like, get some of these people who are shit up in the West that just don't have a gig, but they're all veterans and they did what they do. Get that guy into your fucking squad. Get 2 or 3 people in, maybe. Put more time in theory. These are all things you can do that don't cost tons of money. They're all just like shrewd pickups, aren't they? So, no, I'm with you. Right. What's funny is you're going to see a theme here. So you know how my good point was like, wow, tier 1.5 to tier 3 has never been better. Bro, right. I'm about to go the other direction on this one. Because bearing in mind, today, at the day of recording, was the day where NAVI actually shit the bed to the SAW team that has players. None of you could even name both of those players. And you just found out from me on this show they came from Endpoint. Not everyone else is just looking at the... You're all assuming that's the SAW just without Aristotle, aren't you? Like, nobody watches these games. Nobody thinks SAW is good. No one even know. They don't even know how they're winning these games. So here's what I have to say. Bear in mind, NAVI just fell today. Bro, if you want to go top 2 teams in the world, we can have an awesome conversation. Spirit and Vitality. Is it just the head-to-head that decides it? Ziwu and Duncan. Tell you what, though. Positions 3, 4, and 5, whatever ranking you're using, I don't know if it's ever been weaker in CS than right now. You go to whoever if Navi's the 3rd best team, we're in trouble. If Eternal Fire is the 4th best team, we're really in trouble. And if Mongols is actually the 5th best team in the world who can't win a fucking game on stage unless they're playing Eternal Fire, then we are in a lot of trouble, boys. Because if you want to talk, why not, about old CS podcasts I did, when you used to go back to the top 10 back in the day, mate, it's only when you got to about 7 or 8 it got dodgy. You'd see like number 6 might be like Titan with Kenny S, Virtus Pro with fucking Snacks. You could have some banger top 5, top 6. I don't know that 3, 4, 5 has ever been weaker in CS. What do you think, mate?
I think that's actually really interesting because, like, you say that and you say back to your old videos, and in my head, I almost have like an ingrained like memory of what the HLTV looked like in, say, like 2016.
Okay.
Like at that point, like you're reading down the list of those teams and you're thinking to yourself, like, I would even say like top 10 outside of the top 10 is where it starts to get dodgy. And I guess I can't agree with you more, but it's almost like, it's weird. It's like a contradictory point to what you made before. It's like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a good thing that is the level that all these teams have found themselves at, or is it inherently a bad thing where I think that maybe, for example, a team like SAW, they're not exactly, like blowing everybody out of the water or anything like that, but they're gaining points mad crazy. But you look at a team like Mongols and they don't make deep runs, right? Like they don't do this top 4, top 2, top 1. That's where I have a problem. It's the problem where they're in these rankings, but they don't actually, you can't even say that they're a top 5 team when they're not making like top 5th, 6th consistently at events. And that's where I always like draw that discrepancy. But Yeah, I guess that's where I lie on it. There's not really much more to say.
Put it this way, I'll give you the addendum point that I had to make on one of those like feed the trolls that I just did with Demps and Tech Girl, which is when Demps was like talking down some of the results of like, you know, the Falcons and Mouse at PGL, I had to stop and go, but who is there to beat at the moment in CS? Like, essentially, unless Spirit fucking and Vitality go, and it turns out Navi's potentially sus, there actually aren't any top teams anymore, boys. Like all the giants have sort of left for some reason, or they don't exist anymore.
It's also kind of unfair. A lot of these teams, not unfair, but it's kind of the reality of things that these teams are always like changing. They're always trying to adjust to this new thing, whether it be forced changes that they feel like they have to make, you know, or ones that they just made, you know, like the major seasons just ended. We're turning around for Austin in a couple of months, and so many teams I feel like now compared to like, again, talk about 2016, what in the top 10, maybe 2 or 3 teams were changing maybe 1 player at a clip. Now we're seeing these teams make 2, if not 3 player changes at the turn of a season. And it's like absolute parity for a while until you know who that pecking order is. And by the time you settle it, it's already too late. It's already the next shuffle.
The top 2 teams, Spirit and Vitality, are just in a very distinct S tier for me. And then unfortunately, the A tier kind of feels like it's a B tier. That's kind of the problem. And then even like you said, the 15 to 30, that actually just feels pretty close up behind that B tier, almost like a C+ tier, which is cool for the competitiveness of the scene as a whole, but it just makes it feel very top heavy right now. Because I mean, I was talking about this recently on my stream of just like I don't really see Navi as true contenders for titles right now. They take close games to these contending teams like Spirit and Vitality, but they also, and I literally said this maybe the day or 2 days before, I was like they can also just kind of lose to teams before they get to the Vitality or Spirit game. So it's not a great place to be for those teams. I'm gonna even you know what, I think I can spin this into a kind of a hot take though. I actually think that if you give these teams another month, the teams that are going to make themselves more firmly or slot themselves more firmly into that 3-4-5 are going to be Falcons and FaZe. I see a lot more potential with them. I think Brokey just needs to fix whatever's going on with him right now, because he's just ruining games for them.
Good analysis. I love that.
and Falcon. There's more to it than that. There is some more to it than that. I would give a more balance. I could give a more balanced take on them. No. Yeah, but also
Maui's
Falcons.
3 tips for the game. Step 1, Brokey needs to step it up. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And then with Falcons, I mean, the cool thing about them is that I can kind of rely on them in big stage games now. I mean, Dexter is a big stage player. Yes. Nico's a big stage player. Kixan actually calls a very cool, calm, collected game in high pressure moments. Unfortunately with them, they kind of bottom out a little bit because Magisk and Tessis are sort of hit or miss for me lately. Like, I wanted to say so many good things about Tessis, but like, he just doesn't do it game to game. And there's so many. Yeah, maps he just goes completely absent on, and he can't be the secondary rifle star to Nico. And a guy in Magisk who I thought, maybe if the team improves around him, we'll see a little bit more. Just kind of hasn't happened either. So, but I think their core 3 is really good right now, and I think that they could pass up the Mongols, Eternal Fires, even G2 Navis of the world, unless those individuals start getting back into form. But no, I rate FaZe and Falcons for the next month. I think they're the teams I'm going to really look out for to see if they're able to jump into the 3-4 and then kind of slot up well into that A+ tier as Vitality and Spirit chug along.
Like, put it this way, the obvious reason to me why the rankings just don't reflect reality is in theory, the way the rankings work makes sense. These teams are making the playoffs. The problem is, if you are some of these squads that just never win a playoff game, like, I don't care that on paper, if you play 50 opponents, Mongols is way better than Falcons. That's like you say, Maui. Teams like FaZe, Falcons, maybe even Mouse, we can sort of rely that they would in a bloody best of 3. Like, they won't instantly just collapse on the stage, will they? Where some of these other teams, it's like, you are, by the way we're doing the rankings, we have to give you the status. You're getting all the playoffs, but it does feel bullshit that you could be like number 4 in the world, but you have no chance of making the final. Like, something doesn't make sense about that, does it? Yeah. Which is also, I've never seen that in CS before either. I've never seen that in CS.
Mouse is kind of entering that territory. I mean, I made so many hot takes about them before we even saw a match that I'm kind of like I'm a little slow to crown them, even though I watched them win in person in an arena. But you're right. They would also be more likely.
By the way, don't worry.
The 5th rank.
Maui, this is where also you are continuing my lineage, which is, we're just listen, one of the great things about a being opinion is by definition, they're biased, aren't they? So when I did the Feed the Trolls episode, I even did it like, because it's funnier this way. We broke down all the top teams, like why Mouse isn't even that good, even though they won Cluj, Falcons, whatever.
Exactly.
And then the joke at the end of it all is, but none of that applies to FaZe. They're still really good, and I believe in them.
exactly.
They all lost.
They're just going to be good. They're going to be good. I know.
Even though they lost to those exact
hold on.
teams and finished fourth.
Just watch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my prerogative to do that. I can be biased like that.
Yeah, of course.
Right,
I aim to have more of a spine when it comes to things like that. Give me a couple more. Give me a couple more months.
Exactly. Right. Okay. What is the ugly point we're going to go to then? Why not?
Yeah, this one actually probably won't take that long, to be honest with you, because it's another breaking news thing that I feel like just needs to be addressed. And it's the fact that now with VRS, it's the international teams that are starting to leak in towards the. It's not necessarily, I guess, a local LAN, but Fragadelphia is hosting an event in Las Vegas, and they're signing up teams like NIP. An organization 9. I don't know if you're familiar. I assume you are.
Polish one.
They also apparently are inquiring about coming, and it's ugly because I think you can look at it from two different viewpoints. To where it's good in the sense that North America gets higher competition levels, right? We're kind of bringing the better teams to us inadvertently, and the bad part of it, so to speak, is that it kind of will get to a point, in my opinion, where these events that are meant to be more for your NA advanced, trying to break through North American main teams to try and make something happen, and then your top NA ECL are almost always going to get blown out if this is the point where you come to where like 4 or 5 European teams with a dollar or two can just cross the sea for 4 days and get VRS points for fun and for free. And that just bullies us out of our entire point system from the first place, to where it's always going to be Liquid, Furia, blah, 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 and blah, where, these teams aren't going to really have a chance. And Launder's Land is a good example as well of something where he was like, we don't really want this to be like the big thing. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of want this to stay local, but when you offer VRS points, you entice North American teams, but what you also do by that point is you entice a lot of other teams to be able to swoop in and take that away. So,
I mean, to be fair to Launders, they're sticking to their ethos. They're being very amateurish in how they run the tournaments. So,
For sure, right, guys?
That's rude.
Listen, we all love Launders. We all
to be a representative of Launders.
It's foul as fuck. It's foul as fuck. I get it, Maui. But they did fuck up the land. They did, though. So
I know. It's various.
It's all. As the man who ran Flashpoint, it's all harmless banter. It's all harmless.
I know. That's true. Yeah, glass houses. Yeah.
What do you think at this point, though?
I feel like. I'd love to see. I didn't know 9 actually joined up for it. Actually,
they inquired. They didn't officially do the joining process yet.
I feel like it's ugly in a way because the only European teams that can go to a 10K LAN are ones that are willing to spend probably like 6K to fly all their players there, house them, and fly back just to get points. And so we're kind of making this VRS system pay to win, where of course NIP will get some VRS points by going to this LAN, but the fact that they're paying more to just go to it is the awkward part for me. I guess it's like a financial thing that it's worth the investment for them. Okay, yeah, sure. Are we going to see teams like NIP just keep going to Fragadelphia's and Launders lands to just get points because the tier 2 slog is difficult? I kind of hope not, but in a way, the bright side about this and why it's actually a really great ugly point is that it actually gives some prestige to Fragadelphia. It gives some prestige to Launder's Land. It makes it so that if there are a couple tier 2 orgs that are willing to do that stuff, dude, I mean, why not Fnatic? Why is Fnatic not going to this?
OG, that's another one I think could very well send their players.
Totally.
They've got the money.
Totally. These orgs should be definitely sending their kind of like, dude, Bait's been on the cusp of getting a VRS invite for so long. If they can muster the money to just go to one of these events, I am sure they are going to clean up. And then they will beat a couple of the teams that are in that like 20th, 18th, 16th rank spot. They could move up a bit, and then they could finally get into a major, hopefully. So I think it's actually weirdly valid to do this, but in a weird way, it's kind of like a pay to win thing, which I don't think. At the end of the day, Counter-Strike is kind of pay to win. The better system you have and the better internet you have, you're going to be at an advantage too. So maybe it's not that bad.
Based.
Well, I like the way at the end he almost remembered he was American there. Like, wait a minute.
I made main on a laptop twice. I made main on a laptop twice, so I can say that to other people.
By the way, the other reason why this was actually quite literally inevitable is I told you when I went to the boffins who know how all that shit works with the VRS points, and obviously I was just asking about Imperial Female, like how did they qualify? How does this work? And they were showing me on the GitHub. The first thing they told me is, oh, don't worry, we're all going to find ways to abuse this loophole. Like we're going to go to like Epic Land in the UK, like any land that just has prize money basically, you can get the points. We're just going to attend that and clean up because it's the same principle. You just go to the land, all the land wins are just counted as land wins. They don't mind who the opponent is. It does technically attenuate some of the points, but the point is a land win is a land win. Because if people don't know, the reason Imperial Valkyries qualified wasn't even just that they were like winning the land. They were winning the land and never losing a game, guys. So they were just like maxing out their score the whole time, and that got them high up enough. So on that level, like at least there's still an option. And in theory, as you say, in theory it is better for the people at Fragadelphia. You're not just playing like, lol, just even real. Like you're actually going to play now potentially against like Blame F and like fucking Man2, etc. He plays on 9 if people don't know. The only thing is though, I will say, on the other end though, it is kind of ridiculous that these like real teams are going to these lands. Like I will never be able, sadly, to think of the end of Shocks than when he was in that Apex and went to Fragadelphia and like didn't even do anything. It's like, but that fucking Shocks. Like, what do we even? At that point, it's like, mate, that's like if LeBron actually came out and he actually was just getting his shit pushed in by like the fucking Pelicans. Like, just fucking hanging up already at this point. This is just sad for everyone involved. Like, you want to be like, no, guys at Fragadelphia, you're competing against Shocks. Like, you're not even. That's just the corpse of Shocks. Like, this is just sad at this point in time. So
people are like shaking his hand and like asking for mouse pad signs, and he gets out after the semifinal. He loses it. He's like, "Will you sign my mouse pad, please?"
Exactly. Right. Anyway, now we go to Maui's ugly point.
Yeah,
right?
My ugly point is just a quick one. I just find it kind of funny, and it's just super annoying. I feel like I'm getting really annoyed by tournaments that are showing players' view models. This shit is just pissing me off. It's just I feel like people like Big Zero, when I see that he's got that left-handed sort of view model.
Yeah, it's like almost straight on or something, right?
Yeah. Ema right now is doing it. Big Zero is doing it, and I feel like it's actually costing my enjoyment of the game, legitimately. Okay. I actually, it's just a short point where am like, I don't really think I want to see people's view models.
I think Davey started that.
Davey was one of the first people on his stream that used the really centered view model because he says that it allows you to see the most of your screen. It's almost like having, like, you know, if people played arena shooters back in the day, you would love to take away your gun because you want to just see everything on the screen because you need the max field of view possible because people can pop up anywhere on your screen. Not really as important in Counter-Strike, although there is like one map or one instance probably per 2 years where I see, he couldn't see him because his gun was blocking him. I'm pretty sure that it does happen. I think actually the one time on Vertigo, if you were going down on like the short Ivy side of the ramp and you were coming down and you peeked right, and there's guys that are in that little like yellow rafters area, your gun would cover them.
Yeah.
That was probably the one spot I saw it affected people the most because it's like finally a person is beneath you to the right, just like your view model is blocking. But now that's out of the map pool, so it's like I don't really feel like I need my vision blocked. Actually, now that I think about it, Davey played a lot of Vertigo, so I think that's actually maybe why he did it.
He's
so
just hustling this one angle, just play the angle all day long.
Circle.
Yeah, exactly. But now I just don't want to see these people's view models. Like I'd rather see it just as is. Another little ugly thing. I think Big Uzera on his gun had that little gun charm that like flipped upwards. Like he had like a little mini AK keychain on his AK that went upside down upwards, and it was just the most tilting thing to see his view model like that and the AK upwards. Yeah, just a little complaint. It's like a petty grievance almost of just watching these games is just pissing me off.
I'm not really one way or the other personally. I think it's interesting to see. I think I personally like. I guess if it was gone, I wouldn't care. But it's here, and I'm indifferent, frankly.
Here's the thing, I'm with Maui on this one. I also do find stuff like that annoying because the problem I have is it's so unnecessary and the upside is so incredibly negligible. Yeah. Like, essentially, beyond the novelty of like, it's weird, he doesn't use a normal view model. Like, beyond that, I'm not really getting anything. In fact, there's actually downsides that you're saying, Maui. Like, the worst thing for me is I don't want any of the weird thing. I hate it when they have the crosshairs on. Like, some people use a stupid crosshair. I don't want to see that. Like, can't I just have a pleasant crosshair and view model for me, the viewer at home, and understand that I'm never going to quite see their setup anyway. By the way, that angle of like, yeah, but you see what they see. I'm not on their monitor. I don't know what fucking native resolution. There's a million factors that don't even make that real, by the way. It's more just the novelty. Does he use a weird crosshair, or does he use like a stupid view model that's different in that sense? Because I'm with you. I don't even think that's that big a deal. And the other reason I don't like it is, that's why the charm thing I knew was going to fucking tilt me so hard, bro. Because that actually can block things on the screen. Like, that can actually make it so you can't see something on a corner or when someone does a peek. It's just, again, why is this something we need? Okay, I'll tell you what it reminds me of. If anyone's ever seen this famous clip, it is a nightmare when someone points it out. There's a clip in one of the latter-day Transformers films where, for some reason, I assume it's Michael Bay, he just does, Maui, every single cut, like every 3 seconds there's a cut, and each camera's in a totally different aspect ratio. And it's like, when someone points it out to you, it's like being Malcolm or Clockwork Orange. Like, get me out! I can't fucking watch this anymore. Because once you notice it, it's just fucking with your head that your eyes are just, like, and so that's what I feel like when you keep swapping between, like, in like a 2v2, when you swap between all the POVs. It's like, right, he's got to go in here and his crosshair, and I'm thinking, like, what am I fuck? Can I just see? Can I just fucking see the game? Why do I have to decipher all this shit on my screen? Just make it easy. Because I'm with you. I used to come from Quake when we used to make all the screens pick 3, and it's like just one texture. And I'm like, there he is. Perfect visibility. It's already bad enough in CS. People like crouching behind a car, like on the glint, like a little fucking leaf. Like, what is this shit? Like, so I don't want it to be real war. I want just fucking visibility, please. Can I see the game?
I do take back my statement because
we got you into it. Okay.
I had a trigger because you mentioned the crosshairs, and this is actually really interesting. There was a production team. I don't remember who it was. I'm going to throw a name out there. Really, really wacky. I think it was Starladder at one point would do replays from the native resolution with view model and crosshair of the player, and I'm actually cool with that. That because that means I don't have to see it for 99% of the game. All I have to see it for one sick clip.
Yeah.
It's like one cool 3K. And I think that somebody did that also later down the line and then sprinkled in the voice comms. And I was like, that is peak, and that's interesting and fun. And I like that. So
yeah,
I'm with that.
Right. The last point of the show. It's also perfect timing because people did reference this earlier. I just picked as my trajectory. I was going to pick it anyway, actually, but this game just makes it perfect. It's got to be NAVI's trajectory as a team. Like, bro, remember, at the end of last year, we're all forgiving them for the major. We're just going, look, it's not that big a deal. That Blast Wolf fight, it's not that big a deal. Look, you already were the #1 team. Hey, anyone can fuck up a major. It happens. You know what? You come into this year, you think, actually, like what I just said on the bad point. Bro, there's not even that many good teams after you get the top 2. Like, it should almost be a lock to be like every semi if you're NAVI now. Mate, this NAVI team looks ropey as fuck. Like, first of all, that whole, like, we have the best players by committee. It's like, you definitely don't right now, but you have Bit, you have Immer, and that might be it right now. Like, JL isn't the big gameplay. Wonderful. Everyone wants him fired. Alexi B was never a big fragger anyway the whole time in this team. Then you go look at their map pool. Holy fuck, they are bleeding, guys. They are in so much. If you don't know, they haven't even played 6 maps on LAN. They've never had to play Anubis so far on LAN. Like, they have 5 maps, and at the moment, they for real will win, like, a Mirage, maybe an Inferno, like, just 2 if they can get it. That's it. Like, beyond that, the Nuke, they bleed out their arse. The Ancient was fucking a disgrace. If you saw this game they just played it, like, this team's... this is why I put it as ugly, though. I can't know it's bad. At the end of the day, when the season, maybe they'll fix it, but I want to get your guys' thoughts, because I'm actually really worried about this team right now. I feel like they could just drop off a cliff.
Maui, you rip it.
I mean, they're super ropey. I mean, as a team. I mean, NAVI right now just. I feel like the weird thing is that EMA has actually improved, and it's like the only thing that's gotten better since their major run. Bit's still been pretty good. Today, the game against Saw. One aspect that I found really curious about it is that they played against Saw, and they picked T side on Nuke, as opposed to starting on CT, and then they got ran over on their own CT side. That's got to be a telling sign that this team has lost a lot of confidence in terms of just like how they go through matches now, because I don't think that's a 300 IQ Blade thing. I think that's actually just pragmatism. He's just saying we are probably better at the T side. I mean, they went 6 for 6 when they were on the T side, and then on the CT side they only got three rounds and they lost 7. So right now with watching them, what else have I seen? I mean, they were at Katowice. They lost to Spirit. I think the one thing is that, like, the bright side is that they still stick it to the best teams in the world. Like, they did beat Spirit and then lose to them at Katowice.
That's true.
Like, the bigger match they lost, the close one, or the group stage one they won. Also, they were able to take down teams that kind of feel like they're still in that sort of position waiting to level up, like the Mongols, for example. I saw lost today. I gotta chalk it up to just like a month off. But if they bomb out of this group stage at EPL, your point is entirely valid. If they don't make it through this one, and I almost want to say this, if they don't convincingly make it through it, like I want to see a 3-1. I want to see one bad day at the office. You had ring rust because it was a month away from officials. You're back in the driver's seat. You're like, you got to feel this one out because, man, I have honestly so much faith in Blade and a good amount in Alexi B.
Okay.
But like, you know, if you're Blade, you can actually kind of only do so much at times. You know, like you can't reinvent the wheel strategically every single couple months for a team that is falling apart on CT sides, which is a bit more down to individuals. You can get a CT game plan, you can have a theory, a philosophy behind how you want to play those rounds, but if you know, JL just kind of messes up his rotations and doesn't get there in time, and then they're playing retakes when he should have been in the bomb site helping the other people, then we got a problem here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me when I look at them and I look at their results and I look at where they lose, where they actually get bumped, is the consistency of the teams that are bumping them. I think that most importantly, you have to take into consideration that it's Spirit a lot of the time. And you were saying how that's like kind of like your line, your threshold, like right now is Vitality and then Spirit. And I agree with that entirely. But when it comes down to Navi, where it was like, okay, we're number one technically because we're, you know, bumping out teams on our own, and then we're winning events now, and we're consistently placing second. And we're, you know, in a run for that final spot every single time, if not winning them, and then immediately they come crashing down. It's weird to me to see how often it's the same humps that they just can't seem to get over. And it's not even close in these instances for the most part where they actually do find themselves there, right? And for them, is it a problem where we're just unable to overcome one team and it's in our head now and we're kind of losing more consistently because we're so focused on beating those elite tier teams that a team like Saw kind of slips our radar a little bit, you know what I mean? Where they brand new team, obviously not a whole lot of data to go off of, and maybe that's a one-off fluke studio game. Oops, you know, we're more focused on those elite level teams. And I think this is quite literally the best time for a pro league for them to kind of dissuade all those rumors. I think this is the event where they say, okay, we overcome that little bit of a studio oopsie, you know what I mean? And then we make our way into playoffs. And if they meet like a Vitality or a Spirit and they beat them, you know what? Great. That's the point where we expect them to be at, or at least we hope for them to be at. And if they can't, that's kind of where the questions start being asked, and your point becomes all the more valid.
I'll even just say as well as a last thing to say, I agree with you. This is why it's actually perfect that they're now in this position, but it's part of the Swiss, because when I think about the teams I was saying earlier, you can expose like the fraud stage teams. I just want to see all those teams play Navi. Let me see them against FaZe and then Falcons and then Mauisnake. If I see these teams and they can beat them, then okay, panic solved. It's not a big deal. We can be number 3 in the world. Just the problem is at the moment they've also just basically only played Spirit. Like the other teams are like the ones that are like the Mongols one. Both teams make the playoffs. You never know how competitive that match is. It's basically just the Spirit ones. The Furia one. Who the fuck thinks that's even a real team? You know. So yeah, I'm with you.